All right, I'm ready.
All right, Destiny. Wagwan.
I just have my coffee. It's ready to go.
Let's go. Let's just jump right in.
Okay.
I know what it is, but for those that don't know what is the LES yearbook?
So the Lower East Side Yearbook is a multimedia community memory sharing, archival, preserving our history of the Lower East Side, and just a record that we exist, but specifically for folks who grew up in public housing. So that's a little bit, the formal thing of what it is. But
but tell me what it is. Like if I was like sitting right next to you eating popcorn or something.
Yeah, it's inspired by high school yearbooks. You got the collage page of memories like in high school, but we're just remixing it and making it our own, focusing like on our neighborhood of the Lower East Side. So like we'll have like the poetry page, like poems like about your grandma's, favorite meal that you have, or you'll have like a graffiti page, paying homage to like, graffiti writers of the time, a fashion page.
It's multifaceted because there's also like interview aspects to it and photography aspects and paper and collage.
Yeah, so it's not just like it's not just going to be like a physical book, but it's also going to live like digitally online, where you can click and like listen to folks' stories.
Yes.
And there'll also be like slideshows with photos that folks are going to submit or have submitted. Yeah, it's just taking a life of its own.
I got to ask you, like, what has been that thing that you've learned about this project? Like, what has this project so far, what has it taught you?
It's taught me like what community really feels like, because we say community this, community that all the time.
Right.
But like it really feels like we're building something very special. And I don't know, I've never had this feeling in community building before. So it just like gives me goosebumps to be around creative folks who are passionate about what we're doing, in creating this yearbook.
Yeah.
So I felt like I've found like my tribe, my extended family through this process.
I feel like it's evolved. Like when I folded into it, how long you been doing it?
When did it start? Last fall?
Yeah.
Is that when we started?
So let's just say almost a year.
You actually are the first one that I think you interviewed me asking like, what do you plan to do next? And this was an idea on my mind.
And now it's here.
And now it's come to life.
What I love about just watching, and not just watching from the sideline, but also participating, and I'm grateful because it is one of the most fulfilling things that I've done in my career. And I really mean that, because you have me in rooms talking to people where I'm listening to like sincere, beautiful stories. And so I love how it constantly evolves, and you have no problem having an idea and then making it tangible. My favorite one so far is LES Prom. Talk about that for a second.
Oh yeah, so LES Prom so I had a fellowship with Magnum Foundation, which supports photographers, specifically like documentary photographers. So I had this budget to like create to do whatever I want with it for my personal projects. So my idea was, I'm like, inspired by high school and yearbooks is like, you have your prom.
Right.
So I was like, let's party with a purpose and create a Lower East Side prom to like spread the word, get more folks involved.
Yes.
So that was like a moment where you're saying like, of the project evolving. It's just like, I just called up like some of my students, some of my neighbors. I'm like, hey, you want to DJ? Hey, you want to MC?
And here's the thing, like, what's the spot that we eat at, the lunch spot with Roxy? What's the name of that spot?
Shopson's.
So I just remember sitting in Shopson's, and you're like throwing this idea around, and then you're like, yo, the date is blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay. So I show up, and there's a DJ, and then there's like, a beer table, and then there's a photo booth in the back, and then you got photographers running around, and then I'm meeting the community as well as like movers and shakers and other creatives. Like, it was just a time. And it was free. I do want to say that
and
too.
And it's free. Everything's free.
So Like, and it was
Everything's
on,
free
and
always.
it was on
At
Avenue
every
D.
LES
Like,
yearbook, it
yeah,
will be free.
yes, it was free, and it was on Avenue D. I'm sure that rhymes, but still, like, it was a
Free at
good
Avenue
experience.
D. Yeah, no, we're having another event come up on July 17th at Creative Time. We'll put the details
On the page.
in the article, yeah, on the page.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the next. It's the Lower East Side Yearbook Showcase. So we're gonna be exhibiting like all the different workshops we've been doing throughout like the fall to present day. So
Perfect.
yeah, so we'll have different artwork, poetry, some spoken word, music, free food, drinks. So
Love it.
come on out.
I'll be there.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
Let's give them a whiff of what we've done. Like let's give them a whiff. Like people who are listening, they know that New York said just kind of we do what we want, because it's us. We own it. We can do whatever we want. So like this is, believe it or not, an intro to a whiff of what we've been and what you've been and the team that's been growing and all the things. So one of the things that you and I collaborated on was various conversations around Baruch houses and LES,
And walled houses.
And and even at prom, we got some audio there. But sometimes we do these long form conversations, and one of the standout ones, because it's Ricky is one of one. I'll just say is we had a conversation with Ricky, and we wanted to give people an idea of what these conversations actually sound like uncut. Do you want to talk about it before we roll into it?
Yeah, so Ricky is, oh my God, one of a kind. Like you said, he is a multidisciplinary artist, activist in the neighborhood. And I just felt like him inviting us into his sacred space in his home and sharing, his reflections about, living in the Lower East Side was just like incredible. Like we heard it felt like his life story within like, what was it, an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours of our time with him.
But it was so vivid and poetic and energetic.
He's a poet.
Yeah.
He has a way with words. Like when he speaks about anything, you can just imagine it in your head.
And so he's just a genuinely like magical, good energy person already.
Yes.
For him to like really give us his story uncut.
But I felt like it was like that for, Mario, who's also a activist and a community leader from Walled Houses. Like, both of them are just like...
That was very serious. Mario, I remember at one point he was like
4 hours. I think that was like 4 hours.
That was like 4 hours. And at one point he was like, how do you know this? Like, he was like, you're dangerous, brother. Like, it was like the best compliment that I've ever gotten for doing interviews, because he was just like, I don't know, I didn't intend to give you everything I gave you, but he was, he was very gracious to give us the story. So like you and I, peppering, kind of, not saying that we were doing the good cop, bad cop thing, but you would like dip in and dip out. And so it was a well-rounded conversation.
Well, with your craft of like talking to folks, like that was so like, that's not my strength sometimes, like to get their story out, like in conversation is not my, strength. So to have you there to share your talent alongside me, like, let's look at your your photo album.
Yeah.
Let's look at your photos.
I just want to say it literally, you called me and asked me to be myself and to do things that I genuinely love to do. And so like when we were working on it and I was sitting in Mario's house and sitting in Ricky's spot, and I'm just sitting there like, yo, this is exactly what I want to be doing in this moment. And so to be able to share this.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
But I'm like, I think that's what is so special about this project, right? It's like, okay, I had this idea, but I'm just letting whatever waves of, creativity through my friends and be like, hey, you're good at this. Like, why don't we use your talent to build this yearbook, right? So it's like we've created these yearbook committees. So now we have a graffiti yearbook committee. So like they're taking leadership of like doing that section or chapter of the yearbook. And then I'm like, oh, I have this idea to do to audio stories to put on the website. I'm like, why don't I hit up Aman and see if he can do what he does best? And we just join forces and make it happen.
And I also want to say before we roll out is I love the fact that you're empowering people. People throw love around, people throw community around, people throw empowering around. But to take action and actually do it, where like you're literally talking to a 6-year-old and you're like, you're going to do the cover of this. And they're drawing up things and you're talking to this person who's good at that, like you just said. But like you're putting people in position to do what they love and not just like, oh, I have this idea and then eventually nothing happens. You know, like people are seeing the work tangibly and the part that they're playing. And I feel like that is the definition of empowering somebody. And so it's not just about me as a professional. You're whatever they have to offer, you're putting it in this pot of gumbo and creating this LES yearbook experience. And I salute you.
Thank you, Aman. Like you said it best. Like that's exactly why I wanted to do this. You know, I keep calling it a project, but it's really not a project. It's just, I don't know. We're just building. We're building and preserving our stories. That's all I can say.
There you go. So on that note of building and preserving, let's roll out and listen to this, Ricky. And all the information will be on newyorksaid.com until we get the LES Yearbook website up and running. And even then we'll connect to it. So let's keep it going.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you, Aman.
Perfect. I knew if we just chatted it up, it will come out exactly the way we wanted it.
You're listening to the New York Said podcast.
Fear not, my friends. This will be my greatest performance.
Give it to me.
Here we go. We came, we saw, we kicked its ass.
So Ricky Rock, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Spanish Harlem. I was born in 1955. During that period of time in Spanish Harlem, there was a whole transition from the neighborhood going from Italian to Latino, and there was this whole mix in the community. I was in Catholic school, and I was very much interested in theater and dance.
What got you interested in theater and dance?
Being cast as Joseph in the first Christmas play at school, it was like the big role you had to get. I wasn't so much caring about who Joseph was. I just wanted the big role.
And you wanted to wear the coat?
And I wanted to wear the coat that my grandmother made. You know, I liked the whole idea of having a cape even back then. Anyway, that gave me the bug. With that being my introduction to theater, as I went on into school and stuff, my mother realized that I had an interest in theater. And I had a next door neighbor. Her name was Harriet Brown. And she was a vaudevillian dancer that used to perform at the Cotton Club. I was very much endeared to her stories, and my mother hired her to teach me how to tap dance. And so I started learning how to tap dance in my apartment, so on and so forth. And time went on, and I graduated from grade school, and there was a tumultuous time in my family. My mother was getting divorced, and my mother, myself, and my sister, we left Manhattan and moved to the Bronx. While I was in the Bronx, I enrolled into Rice High School, which was in Harlem. And I guess in a way I was a bit of a brat because I didn't know any other kid that took a taxi to school and took a taxi back. But
how much was a taxi back then?
Shit, I don't know, because actually my mother had an account, I guess a black type of Uber type of service back then, so my mother had an account with them. So I'd get into my cab on the Grand Concourse, go straight down to the Grand Concourse, and go to 124th on Lenox Avenue and go to Rice High School. In Rice High School, there was a theater department, and I attached myself to the head of that department. I let them know I was so interested, so on and so forth. And besides being very rebellious about different things I was learning, because I was very inquisitive, I had a lot of questions about Catholicism, so on and so forth. My main focus was theater and history.
So was there any point where you were like mean about it, or was it conversational, or would you like debate with the teachers with your rebellion?
During that period of time in history here in the United States, it was legal for a parochial school teacher to discipline you. So I was always being disciplined, actually taken into the hallway and hit in my hands with a black leather strap for questioning things. Like I used to question the Holy Trinity. I used to say it sounds so science fiction and things like that. And, so, yeah, I was very vociferous. I always had an opinion.
Any of that feel like abuse now that you're an adult, or do you understand it?
I understand now as an adult I was abused. I was silenced. I actually went from a very outgoing kid to being a very introverted kid. But theater became my ability to perform and so on and so forth. Rice High School, being in Harlem, there came a time that I became very brave and I decided I wanted to look at the neighborhood. And I would always make sure that I walked in a straight line so I knew how to get to a straight line back to the train station or to a cab. This one particular year, I went walking through Harlem and I passed this brownstone and I heard this sewing machine going, and I looked down and there was a gentleman. He was sewing in this brownstone basement window. And he looked at me, I looked at him, and I waved. His window was cracked open and he said hi, and I said hi. And I just very curiously said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm working on some costumes." There came a time that I would walk down that street again and him and I would pick up a conversation. And he ended up being the costume designer for a woman that was still alive living in Europe. And she was the banana, she was kicked out of the United States because of her beliefs. And she went to Europe and she adopted
Josephine Baker?
Josephine Baker. So
Look at me knowing. Oh, shit!
Yes. So I met this gentleman, and he was a costume designer for Josephine Baker, and she was still alive then. I didn't know who she was, and he let me into his art studio, and his whole studio was filled with black and white pictures of Josephine Baker, different revolutionaries in Harlem, so on and so forth, and fabric. It was just creative energy. And he taught me about who Eartha Kitt was. He taught me about who Josephine Baker was. And time went by, and I became a little bit braver, and I started finding places where they taught dance, the YMCA in Harlem, so on and so forth.
And how old are you around this time?
1974, I was years, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you were a teenager?
Yeah, I was born in 1955, so
Okay.
1974, I was somewhere looking like you.
Can you just talk about the importance of being exposed to that at such a young age?
Being an adult now, especially being a Buddhist, I understand that people come into your lives for reasons. That period of my time, of my life, I was very much entrenched into wakening up about being gay. What's that word? Suppressing those thoughts and stuff because of what I was being taught in school and taught by my family, and I didn't want to be excluded. But what I saw but never spoke on was these artists and things that I were meeting, and this designer. These were gay people living their life in a way that was different from what I thought a gay life would be. So in many ways, it broke down the stereotypes. There was no such word as gay at that time. It was homosexual or faggot. Time went on in school, and school was getting more and more difficult. And then this one day, a college student named Lenny Godfrey walked into Rice High School and was holding auditions for a play called Pearly. My theater teacher in the school didn't think I was right for the part and was allowing her to meet darker skinned African American students in the school. The school was 95% Irish at that time. There were very few Latino or black people in the school. I was high yellow. A lot of people thought I was Puerto Rican solely, but I'm a mixture. We'll talk about that, whatever. Come to appreciate that. I remember walking right up to her and I said, "Hey, my name is blah, 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 and I want to audition for you." And she said, sure, why don't you sign the thing? I said, "I don't have time for that." I said, "Because Brother White doesn't think that I should be reading for this part." And Brother White was standing right there. I looked at him, I looked at her, and she said, "You can read for the part." Make a long story short, I got the part, the lead part of Pearly, and Lenny Godfrey, this woman, became my mentor in theater and started introducing me to other people in theater. In 1974, I met Gregory Hines and Maurice Hines from Hines, Hines and Dad. She introduced me to them, and the first thing I did was I walked over to Gregory Hines and I bent over and I kissed his shoes, and he was like, "Get up, young boy." He goes, "What do you know?" I said, "I know exactly who you are." And I said, "Could you step back a minute?" And I tap danced for him, and they hollered. They laughed like, this guy tap dancing in his sneakers. That led to more and more introductions to people and led to me being convinced that theater was going to be my life. And within 2 years, Lenny Godfrey received the star role in the Broadway show Eubie, which was written by Eubie Blake. She introduced me to Mr. Blake, and this kid from the Bronx would be going to these rehearsals and these Broadway shows and watching her rehearse and watching Gregory Hines, watching all these, fabulous performers. And I was just determined that was going to be my life.
And so how did you get to the Lower East Side?
So time went by, and I guess I have to just say it the way it happened. This part of the story is not that pretty. The year of my graduation, my mother, who was a workaholic, she worked 7 days a week and was an entrepreneur. She co-owned a hardware store in the Bronx on Burnside Avenue and the Grand Concourse. It was called Al Dawn's Hardware Store. This one particular day, my mother opened the store, and there was a knock on the door. My mother answered the door, and 3 men pushed their way into the store and proceeded to abuse my mother, to open the safe and to rob the store. My mother tried to be very tough, and she was punished for it. So they beat my mother to an inch of her life and dropped an old-fashioned lead cash register on her head. My mother managed to crawl out of the store onto the street when people could see her and get her help. My mother survived that. My mother survived that, but I didn't. It did something to me, realizing that the most important person in my life could be taken away that quickly. I could have gone the wrong way, and I kind of started going the wrong way, meeting the wrong people, and Lenny Godfrey stepped back into my life and took control. She took control over trying to manage the direction that I was going into. And my mother recovered. I met a gentleman in the Bronx who told me about Buddhism. I was a reluctant Catholic. I practiced Catholicism out of fear and out of worry about retribution of losing my family's love if I didn't. So anyway, this gentleman introduced me to Buddhism. He asked me if I ever heard about Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, and I told him no. But there was something about him that made him put his hand on my shoulder. I can still see it now. And he looked at me. He said, "Are you okay?" And something about the way he said it made me be very honest. And I said, "No, I'm not okay." I said, "I'm by myself. My mom's recuperating in the hospital, and things don't look good." And he said, "Well, I think you should try chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo to turn things alive up in your family." For whatever reason, I decided to go with him. That evening, I left the people that I was drinking beer and smoking pot with, and I went with him, and I walked into a room, and an apartment on Briggs Avenue, across the street from Jan's Ice Cream Parlor. I really wanted to go to Jan's Ice Cream Parlor, but I was intrigued about what this guy was telling me. So when I walked into the building, I heard this vibration. I felt this vibration. People were chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. And I walked into the apartment, and so all these people kneeling and chanting in front of a scroll, but the vibration or the sound in the room was like so magnetizing and uplifting. And he asked me to sit down and to try saying it. And to my surprise, it came to my lips like butter on hot toast. And it was as if I've said this before in my life. And I started chanting, Nam Myo Renge Kyo, Nam Myo Renge Kyo, Nam Myo Renge Kyo, Nam Myo Renge Kyo. I chanted for the first time. And he, like Lenny Godfrey, started visiting me and encouraged me to keep chanting for my mom. I started chanting for my mom, went to visit my mom in the hospital, and she asked me what I had been doing, and I told her. And I asked her to chant Nam Myo Renge Kyo with me, and I guess what's that word? When somebody just agrees with you, just goes along with you. So she chanted with me a little bit, and I chanted with her a little bit. And every day I would come, we would just do a little bit. Anyway, make a long story short, my mother recovered. My mother recovered after doctors said that they didn't believe it would be a long time before she recovered. But my mom recovered. She had night blindness. She couldn't see at nighttime very well, But I decided I wanted to keep on chanting. And my mother said, I like the way this feels, Ricky, and there's something changing you. So we started chanting together. Make a long story short, which is very hard for me to do. Monty asked me what I wanted to be, and I said, well, I'm an actor. I want to be more of an actor. And I told him about Lenny Godfrey and the different things that I was doing. And he said, well, if you want to be an actor, be an actor. And he said, what's stopping you? And I was like, I don't know how. He said, well, chant Nam Myo Renge Kyo if the doors are open. Or, just, it'll happen if you want manifest this in your life. So my mother became my manager. She started managing me, saying, I'm going to help you get into this. My mom was very smart. So my mom started bringing home show business newspaper, and my mom saw an audition in the newspaper for a film called The Warriors. They wanted Screen Actors Guild union members, and I was not a member of AFTRA, the American Federation of Television and Radio. I wasn't a member of Equity. I wasn't a member of SAG, but I believed in myself, and I was hungry. I wanted this. Lenny Godfrey and Monty encouraged me, to go do it, give things a try. So my mom gave me car fare, and we couldn't afford cab fare now at that time. And she put me on a train and said, you take this train, you get off Times Square, you go to this, that, whatever. And she sent me to this audition. She said, when you go to the audition, they're going to ask you if you're a member of Screen Actors Guild. She said, say yes. So I said, yes. They asked me for my union card. I said, well, my mother told me to say yes, but I'm not in the union. They said, well, you're just sorry, this is for union members only. At that time, there were beepers. My beeper goes off, and it's my mom. She's like, how things are going? So I told Mom, I said, well, they're sending me home. She goes, the name of the director is Walter Hill. Go find out who the director is. So I already knew who the director was in the room, and I walked up to Mr. Walter Hill, and I put out my hand, and he put out his hand. I said, my name is Ricky Colon, and I said, I'm an actor, and I would love to be in your movie. And he started laughing, and an AD tried to send me on my way, but he held on to my hand, and he called someone over, and he said, take care of this guy here, get his information and stuff, and have him come back. I kind of looked at the AD that told me to go away with this smart act look like, see, told you. Anyway, I came back the next day. Walter Hill was standing there, and he sent somebody. I was with a whole group of African-American brothers, every shade of black, and I was the only fucking yellow guy there. And I was like, damn this fucking skin. I just wanted to be so much darker, so much better. Anyway, he pointed to the AD. The AD took me over to a group and got me into wardrobe, which is karate outfit, this, whatever, and said, congratulations, you're a Gramercy Riff. And I was like, what? I'm in the movie? He said, yeah, the director wants you in the movie. Mr. Hill gave me a part in the movie that enabled me to work for about 300 days on this movie, which made me eligible for the possibility of becoming a union member. And then this one day, I was determined. I did not want to be background. I wanted a part in this movie, but I wasn't Screen Actors Guild yet. My mother did research, and she said, you only need one line to become a Screen Actors Guild member, just one word, just one line in the movie. And that'll be the beginning. And she, so she told me that. So I chanted, my mother chanted with me. We're chanting Nam Myo Renge Kyo. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. There's a 6:30 time. My mother this time got cab fare together and sent me to the set in a cab. And we're on the set, and I'm with all these actors that got parts. And I go in, and I get into the back of the line, and all of a sudden, as cameras were rolling, I hear cut. And Mr. Walter Hill points to me and has an AD take me from the back and put me up to the front. And the AD says, when you hear action, you're going to say, right? And I was like this. In my mind, I'm thinking, that must be a word, Anyway, they say action, and the lead actor says something, and the group is supposed to say, right? And I was the first one to say it. And they said, cut. And the director liked it. And he said, okay, let's do that again. You say cut, and then everyone else follow. You say, right, and everyone else follow. And I did. And that entitled me to become a member of Screen Actors Guild.
You're really going to make me watch The Warriors now.
And,
specifically,
yes.
I'm so surprised. I had no idea.
Yes.
I've known you for years, and I'm like, you just dropped this on me right now.
Yes.
Did you know that, Dust? Wow.
Yes, so I became an actor, and it became my life. And Lenny Godfrey kept encouraging me, and my mother kept managing me, and I adapted that style of getting on a movie set and walking up and introducing myself to people. I realized how important that was, to an affirmation of who you are and what you're here to do. My career moved like that. I worked on a movie set and walked up to Harry Belafonte, and I happened to know that this is what the deal was. There was a movie called Beat Street. It was happening. I didn't go audition. It was filming in the Bronx. My mother made me go to the area that was filming, and I saw Harry Belafonte. I was wearing clothing that I hand-painted, and I walked up and said, hi, Mr. Belafonte, and my name is Ricky Colon, and I do graffiti on clothing, and I'm an actor. And he said, well, you sure are. Harry Belafonte called the wardrobe department over, and they hired me to hand-paint clothing for the movie Beat Street. I go home with a garbage bag full of clothing, ties, shirts, and everything. I'm going to Staten Island, go back to my apartment, and put everything on the floor, and I'm graffiti painting this, that, or whatever. My mother's excited. I'm chanting and stuff. And I get all the stuff together, and the wardrobe department saying, we need that stuff. This is what I get it all done in 48 hours, all these clothes. I bring it down to the movie set. I walk into the wardrobe department, and they go crazy over what I've done. And they paid me cash, which blew my mind. And I'm getting ready to leave, and I'm walking off the set thinking, I want to act in this movie so bad. And I turned around and I looked at the AD that had something told me to get, well, this isn't enough, you whatever. You finished with wardrobe, this, whatever. I said, yeah. I said, where's Mr. Belafonte? I said, well, he's over there with the director. And I walked over to Mr. Belafonte again. And I said, thank you so much for this opportunity. He said, wait a minute, where are you going? Because, where are you going? Because we're not finished with you. He said, where's that jacket you had on yesterday? I said, I have it right here. He said, let's utilize him in this set or whatever. And he gave me the opening set to the movie Beat Street. I'm the DJ that opens the window, throws the cords out the window for the guy downstairs to hook it up to the electric pole. And I get to dance with Crazy Legs on Beat Street. And I meet the beatbox master, his first movie, the one who does the beatbox with his mouth. I can't think of his name right. Hip-hop legend.
Dougie Fresh?
So I meet Dougie Fresh, and he says, I've never been on a movie set before. You seem really comfortable. I said, well, that's Harry Belafonte. He goes, well, I know who that is. I said, well, just stay next to me. He said, well, they want me to do my beat. I said, do it. I said, just don't look into the camera, just do it. And Dougie Fresh, that was his first movie and his first introduction to doing on film his work. And him and I exchanged numbers and became friends for a little while. So time went on. I met other people, worked on other movie sets, got to mug Frank Sinatra on First Deadly Sin, got hired as an actor, walked up to the director and got the part to mug Frank Sinatra on First Deadly Sin. There was a TV series on Channel 13 called Oye Willie. It was the first Puerto Rican TV series that was being funded by the Children's Television Workshop. I was too old for the part that was being cast, my mother made me bring my younger brother, who's adopted, by the way, but he's my brother, to the audition. My brother goes into the audition, and all he does is talk about me. They come out laughing, and they say, listen, your brother doesn't want to audition for this. He thinks we should audition you. So I walk into the room. I already knew the script because I had taught it to my brother. I threw the script. The director and everyone put their things down, walked over and shook my hand and said, welcome to Oye Willie. We need you here tomorrow. And they gave me a lead role in Oye Willie. That was my first television series. Alfonso Ribeiro, the guy on
Fresh Prince?
Yeah, so Alfonso Ribeiro, it was his first movie. And he gets into a fist fight with me in the movie and pushes me down a flight of stairs. Meanwhile, I'm a lot taller than him. They had me on my knees. And I was doing this way because he was so damn short. So we're doing this.
The tap dance kid.
Yeah. So that was my first TV series. And then from there, I met Eartha Kitt and started studying with Eartha Kitt and traveled with Eartha Kitt as a part of her dance troupe called Eartha Kitt's Kitties. And then Eartha Kitt got cast in Timbuktu on Broadway and took me backstage to meet all the actors. And again, I met people that I had seen in the past and so on and so forth. And she worked it out so that I'd become a member of Actors Equity. So here I am now in my 20s, and I'm in all 3 unions.
And then...
I never answered your question.
And then what brought you to the Lower East Side? No, we're doing good. No, we're doing good. Yeah, this is great. Like, trust me, we'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah, we'll get there. It's holiday. You know, like it's a train. We're on holiday schedule, so we'll get there eventually.
Okay. What got me to Lower East Side? What movie?
Wait, but I want to hear about the dancing career. You said
For real?
Did you go on tour? Like, who did you go on?
I danced with Eartha Kitt, Eartha Kitt's Kitties. That was an amazing audition.
And what kind of dances are we talking about?
An African style. It's African style, it's Dunham, Catherine Dunham technique. She studied with Catherine Dunham. Anyway, so I go to this audition. My mother makes me go to this audition at JoJo's Dance Factory. Eartha Kitt's there, and I walk in, and there's all these trained ballet dancers and African dancers and hoops and hollers and all this, and everyone lines up. And Eartha Kitt's looking at me. I'm looking at her. She tells everyone to jeté across the room. I didn't know what a jeté was. So I kind of sheepishly started moving back, and she walks over to me, and she says, what's your name, young man? And I told her my name is Ricky. And she takes an open hand and she slapped me in my belly. And she said, hold your stomach tight and just do what they do. So I leaped across the floor. You heard snickering. And then there was a jeté or some other shit across the floor. I tried doing that. And then everyone had to line up to see who got accepted. And she went down the line, thank you for coming, and she got in front of me. And she said, Ricky, right? I said, yes. She goes, you willing to work hard? I said, yes, Miss Kitt. And I smelled strong whiskey, vermouth on her breath. At any point, she hits me in the stomach again. She said, you be back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And she taught me how to dance the Catherine Dunham technique, which was my introduction into that style of dance, and launched a career for me, also another career. I actually got to dance with Whitney Houston on a video and Tina Turner in Washington, D.C. I got to chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo with Tina Turner.
What's one of the life lessons or something that you learned from Eartha Kitt in that period of time?
To not doubt my ability and to not listen to the voices in my head that say you can't. To this day, I fight those voices. So, the Lower East Side.
We happen to be in the Lower East Side, so we're here, but we'll get to we'll get to that.
All right. So I got hired for oh my God, one of the best movies I got hired for was a movie called Times Square with Trini Alvarado, and I do the whole opening scene in the movie Times Square. Okay, so this is the Lower East Side. Here we go. Yeah. So, I get hired to work as a background actor in Times Square at 1:00 in the morning. Times Square back in those days was like Wonderland. It was like crazy. It was like New York turned up. I mean, unbelievable. Anyway, I get hired to work as a background on this movie called Times Square with Trini Alvarado. Again, utilizing that technique that my mother taught me. I get to the movie set and I looked for the director. I think his name was Alan Cummings. Now, my mother had found out where Alan Cummings, the director, lived, and she made me go to where he lived. He lived in Times Square the day before and put my picture and resume under his door. Really bold move. You don't do that shit. I'm on the set. I see Alan Cummings. He's looking at me. I look at him, and I walk over to him and say, hi. I said, my name's Ricky Colon. I said, I put you on. He goes, under my door. He goes, yeah, very interesting. He said, thank you, and he walked away from me. And I'm standing there with the crowd, and there's this gigantic beatbox radio. And he calls me over. He goes, I want you to take that radio, and I want you to start in that corner. I want you to walk towards me and the camera. And I want you to improvise like there's music playing. So I picked up that radio. I got my bop on, and I walked on that movie with the radio box and everything. Boom, boom, all this and that. And then they said, cut. And I thought that was it. And then he gave me a line in the movie selling paraphernalia in the street, T-shirts, this or whatever. That ended up giving me the ability to make quite a lot of money. I made more money than I did on the movie The Warriors. The movie wrapped at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm supposed to follow my mom's instructions and jump into a taxi cab and go to Staten Island Ferry. I decide I'm going to take the #1 train because I'm feeling like lit, I'm feeling like an actor and all this, and I'm feeling like I'm thug and gangster and shit. I tell you with my shit. Anyway, make a long story short.
You felt good.
Yeah. I walked into the subway, and I had already been studying poetry. And I look at this man on 42nd Street, 5 o'clock in the morning, who's obviously high on heroin. And I look at him and I said, that's the playwright Miguel Piñero. And I'm thinking to myself, no. I walked over to him. I said, hello, Mr. Piñero. And he said, get the fuck out of here, kid. And I immediately started reciting his poetry. And I started doing one of his poems, Short Eyes and stuff. And he stopped and he looked at me. He was like, what the fuck? Who the fuck are you? I said, Mr. Piñero. He goes, yo, stop calling me Mr. Piñero. What the fuck's wrong with my name? He was really, really tough. He was high. And I said, I respect your work so much. He said, what the fuck you doing, honey, at 5 o'clock in the morning? I said, I just finished working on a movie upstairs. He goes, get the fuck out of here. You're an actor? I said, yeah. He said, I'm an actor too. I said, yeah. I said, you're amazing. We talked and we went our separate ways. A week later, I get hired to mug somebody here on the Lower East Side on 4th Street between Avenue B and C in some abandoned building as an extra part of a crowd. This time, I didn't see anybody to walk up to like, hi, I'm Ricky Colon. It was very crowded. They were trying to control the crowds. And I'm standing there, and then I hear them call over the AD, call Miguel to set. I didn't think nothing. And then I looked, and here comes Miguel Piñero on the movie set. I walk up to him, and I say, hey, Miguel, remember me? My name is Ricky. He said, remember me? He goes, yo, what's up, shorty? What's up, man? What's up with you, short eyes? He started joking. And I said, nothing. He goes, you working on this? I said, yeah. He said, oh, hold on. Yo. And he started all this, all this attention. He's had a way of not conforming, working differently than everyone else. And he just called the director and he goes, I want this guy working with me. Miguel Piñero got me a part on that set that day. So it was Law and Order, and I'm doing this drug thing with Miguel Piñero, that, whatever. The movie's done, the day is done. And at the end of the day, Miguel Piñero walks up to me and he says, Ricky, no, I'm sorry. I don't really talk about this much, but he didn't really call, he used to call me Pretty Ricky. And I never let anyone call me that because I was always, I survived rape when I was young. So I didn't like to be referred to as pretty. It scared me. But he said it in a very endearing way. So he was like, Ricky, we're going to be doing a few more, filming and stuff on this and different. He goes, whenever Sylvia Faye is going to cast, I asked her if she would cast you. So this woman, Sylvia Faye, walks over and introduces herself to me. And she has a little dog with her named Mr. Chip, because she was the casting director for the movie Mr. Chip. And she asked me for my phone number. And I hear all this gagging and gasping around me. I'm like, I don't know who the fuck she is. She runs this agency. She took my phone number, and for 3 years, whenever she was casting a movie with Miguel or needed a Latino actor, she called me. She enabled me to make enough money to move my family into a home that we could own. You know, my mother was able to buy a home. But anyway, that was my introduction to the Lower East Side, Miguel Piñero, and coming down here to do episodes of Law and Order and another police thing here in New York. I can't think of the name of it. So that was my introduction to the Lower East Side, and I became infatuated with the Lower East Side. Around the same time, I'm messing around with the guy who's from the Lower East Side, who became my husband. I'm messing around with this guy on the Lower East Side, and he starts showing me more things, you know, people around the Lower East Side, this, whatever. And I bump into a theater called the St. Mark's Theater on St. Mark's Place, and I noticed that in the sidewalk, it had the names of Gloria, you know, all these different actors, you know, from the 50s and 60s and stuff. And I said to myself, this is like Roman's Chinese Theater. I said, I want to do a play here. You know, it came to fruition. I wrote my first play and had it produced there by Jane Friedman. So this woman, Jane Friedman, became my benefactor. And my husband moved me here to the Lower East Side into Baruch houses. And I was convinced that being on the Lower East Side, I was going to cement myself in the arts here in the Lower East Side. And I already started meeting the right people, and I made it happen.
Ricky, can you tell us like what time period that was when you moved to?
So this is the thing with my AD, all that stuff like that. This may sound silly, but it's part of who I am. Every now and then people have to remind me about my age, because when I was a teenager, I asked my mother and my family to stop putting candles on my cake. I had a fear of dying young. Something bothered me about the candles and counting up to my birthday. I started experiencing death around me. This is the height of the HIV and AIDS epidemic, and actors and things that I started dying. I didn't like the whole birthday cake thing. So every now and then people have to remind me how old I am. So I can give you an idea. I moved to the Lower East Side, I would think it's 32 years ago. So whatever that would be. What would that be?
We don't need the exact year.
I
We
just
just
wanna
wanted
know
the
Yeah,
time
I would
frame.
say it was about 30 years ago when nothing looked the way it does here right now.
Yeah, paint a picture for us what it looked like 30 years ago.
So 30 years ago, walking through the Lower East Side, I would pass Hasidic Jews, I would pass Puerto Rican doñas and seniors and young people. But what was very interesting to me was the way drug dealers controlled their clients. I started to visualize and understand about supply and demand, and I became very intrigued watching this behavior that I only knew about from movies and things. And being an actor, I forgot to mention that one of the most prestigious art schools here in the city, HB Studios, I got a scholarship to attend HB Studios, also based on an audition, and that was an amazing education in theater. Anyway, so I was very excited about the lifestyle and things I saw on the Lower East Side. There used to be a barber shop on Avenue C that you could not see into the window because the window was covered with Spanish guitars, guitarras, little small Puerto Rican guitars. I forgot what the name of them was. But this barber would cut hair, and then at the end of the night or on the weekends, he would teach young people how to play this instrument. So these kind of sounds and these kind of flavors, I felt romanticized by the Lower East Side. I discovered Tompkins Square Park, and for the first times I saw conga players playing in the parks, and bombero dancers dancing not in their formal wear, but that type of dance, and became fascinated with the details of the Puerto Rican culture. I am part Puerto Rican, but I didn't have any tactile part of the culture except for what came out of the kitchen. I didn't like Puerto Rican music. I didn't identify with it. I was more in tune with the African American or the rhythmic side of my family, which I discovered more about later in life.
Can you talk about the culture and the arts around that time here in the Lower East Side?
During that time on the Lower East Side, art was everywhere. It was in the graffiti, the styles of the graffiti. It was in the food you smelled on the streets, the Puerto Rican doñas with their shopping carts selling pasteles and empanadas and batidos, which are, like milkshake drinks. I found the community here on the Lower East Side accepting, loving, and protecting. The drug dealers that saw you every day didn't fuck with you or bother you. The bodega owners, if you didn't have enough money, knew you'd come back, to pay your bill. It was just very, very interesting. Tompkins Square Park was the mega of the neighborhood and the East River Drive. The Lower East Side was the home of where house music was encouraged here in Manhattan. It was where GLBTQ people could express themselves without reservation or worry. Crisco Disco, the famous gay club, was down at the end of Houston Street. King Street had Paradise Garage. Our neighborhood had the Loft. But what was most interesting was that on the East River Drive, there were abandoned buildings or structures that still had live electricity, and DJs would go to the East River Drive, plug into the lamppost, and DJ at night illegal parties. If you wanted to call them, they were underground parties. I actually went to a party on the Lower East Side where you had to go through a grate cover. You had to pick up a grate and go downstairs into an abandoned train station area for a party. These things happen all over the Lower East Side, and there wasn't texting. It was all word of mouth and who you knew. So I fell into that part of the culture and had a new freedom because I wasn't living in Staten Island with my mom. I was here in the projects, so no one was tell me what time to get home. My beeper went off. I tell my mom, yeah, I'm home.
Meanwhile, you lifting a sewer cover to go to a party.
watching drag queens stuffing their bra with tissues and shit, like amazing. What's very important, and that has to be inside this yearbook, are the important role the garden spaces played in the Lower East Side. So the gardens weren't all gated like they are now. They were more open, could walk in and out. But the older women, African American women, some of the older Jewish women, and definitely the Latina doñas, and some of the padres in the community, they used these gardens to grow vegetables and shit because there was such a famine of good fresh food here on the Lower East Side. So a lot of these gardens were used to grow vegetables and stuff, and they were very protective of it. And then it became, more privatized the way it is now. But anyway, so there's one day I left this apartment, and I took a canvas of mine and some paints. What's that word? I'm mixed media. I write, I play. My whole life is art. So anyway, I go to one of the gardens here on the Lower East Side, and I'm sitting there and I'm painting. And this gentleman walks in, and he looks at me, oh, that's very interesting. And he gives me a flyer. The flyer said, we're a new organization called FEVA, F-E-V-A, Federation of East Village Artists. And we are gathering artists together to create art, and we're having this meeting. So I went to this meeting, and I met Phil, who is the owner and creator of Two Boots Pizza. Him and some other people, I can't think of their names right now, they're iconic here in the Lower East Side, wanted to create a festival. So they worked hard to create a festival and get the permits from the city to do a festival called the Tompkins Square Arts Festival, which later on took on the name of Howl Festival after the famous poem Howl by...
Sugar Daddy.
It said Sugar Daddy.
That's what I call my husband. Excuse me.
It said Sugar Daddy.
Hi, Sugar Daddy. What's up?
We'll take a pause for the cause. We're gonna pick up right where we left off.
I go to this meeting. I meet the owner of Two Boots Pizza. And I immediately tell him I want to be part of this. I wanted this, that, whatever. And he puts me on staff. And next thing I know, I am working with other actors, so on and so forth. And I had an idea with someone else. I said, well, what are we going to do here in the park? And this gentleman named Bob, who's a big real estate broker here in the neighborhood, said, well, wouldn't it be great if we wrapped the entire park in canvases and we had the artists in the neighborhood come and paint sections and so on and so forth? And I was like, well, if we do that, wouldn't it be great if on the last day of the festival, we can invite art collectors to come and buy the art from the artists that are creating the art on the street. And that became the beginning of Art Around the Park, a 3-day festival where we wrapped the entire park in 4 to 5 feet tall canvases made out of recycled billboard material. We had them nailed up on boards, and God, I would say about 100, maybe more artists would come on a Friday, and they would paint for 3 days till it was completed. And a lot of that's been documented by there's a lot of documentation of that. At the end of the first year, I asked if I could take a bigger part in the festival. And they said, well, what would you like to create? And I said, I want to create just like theater. So I started auditioning actors and decided that I was a director and creating content for them to create. So the first production I did, I had an African-American poet stand naked on a box with chains around his body while he quoted some very moving poetry by Maya Angelou. And at the end of that performance, the powers that be decided that I needed to have a yearly budget and create my own part of the festival. So one of the things that bothered me about the festival was that I didn't see any people of color or Latinos in the mix. It was very few. And that bothered me. So I started to work with young GLBTQ, Latino and African American youth in the neighborhood because I was very interested in voguing and houses. I was an outsider of that community, but knew I could grab some of them and create something. And I created a dance troupe called Men in Skirts, which had to do with the movement of fabric on the body, the movement of skirts. I was infatuated the way skirts moved when you danced. And all that came because I received training at Alvin Ailey, also because of Eartha Kitt. So all those things influenced me. And then years went by, and I decided to get involved in politics on the Lower East Side. And what I forgot to tell you was that I had a degree that was not being used. I had my master's degree in social work, but I really wasn't interested in social work. But I saw an opportunity to do some social work in the neighborhood because I had to make a living. And I started working, taking HIV families out of shelters and putting them into NYCHA housing. That became my introduction to young men in the neighborhood that looked out for me because I was looking out for their mother or father or their families.
When you say look out, what does that mean?
Take care of a deficiency, take care of a need that wasn't being met. And in return, I received, I guess, street cred or something where I didn't have to walk down the street bopping, holding my ball sack, acting like a thug. I could just be myself and people would say hi. And I became braver and braver about expressing myself. And that's what's led to more and more opportunity.
The poetry part. Talk to me about the poetry.
So Bob Holman, who is the creator and founder of the Bowery Poetry Club, was a member of the Tompkins Square Howl Festival. At this period of time, FIVA was now going through a financial change. There was a change going through FIVA. And this one particular year, I saw the organization was like, I guess the word is tumultuous. Mm-hmm. There was this inner fighting about power. And this one year, I decided to do a very powerful performance, again, utilizing GLBTQ youth, voguing, so on and so forth. And this woman came to the performance. Her name was Jane Friedman. I knew nothing about her. But I saw that she must have been very powerful or influential because the respect that she was getting. And she wore the customary artist and Lower East Side uniform, which was basic black. Everything always wore black. I decided I wanted to wear black all the time too. But I utilized that training that I got on the film set as a kid, and I walked over and I said, "Hi, my name is Ricky." And she said, "My name is Jane." She goes, "That was a really amazing performance." I said, "I understand that you're going to be involved with FIVA, I said, I want to let you know that I'd like to be involved too. And she said, well, then you will be. And she took my number. A few months later, I got called for a meeting with her, and she became the CEO, or the head, and changed it to Allen Ginsberg Howl Festival and Tompkins Square Park Art Festival Howl. And she gave me a budget. I started having every year at the Howl Festival, I would have a part of the festival just for Puerto Ricanas. So I would have dominoes and so on and so forth, and have that section and have guitarras and bomba and stuff, an introduction. And inclusion. It was important to include what was already here that wasn't being represented, and I became known for that, of integrating and bringing more and more color and life into the festival. And then I was asked to become a board member. Things moved on, and I became an artistic director at the Lower East Side Girls Club, and was a founding member of the opening of the Girls Club. Became a board member of Howl Festival, and became one of the founding members of the Arturo Vega project. Arturo Vega was the gentleman that managed the Ramones. I was privileged enough to clean out his apartment after he passed away and to catalog all his art collection. My life just in the community became all about art and about civic duty. And I guess I don't mind saying I am a respected part of the community. And when I say that, I say respected. I can walk through these streets feeling proud of what I've contributed to it and feel an ownness, a oneness with the community.
I'm going to pivot a little bit. I have one of your poems. Can you read it for me?
Sure. This poem is called Tata, which was the nickname for my grandmother. My grandmother was a Geechee. She was a Native American and black young girl that was taken from her mother, who was a Native American on a reservation. And she became part of the contract that the United States government had with the Catholic Church to deprogram young Native Americans, so on and so forth. So my grandmother started traveling with the Catholic Church around the country when she was taken from her mother, and she became a linguist. My tata settled in Spanish Harlem and met my grandfather, who was escaping the political turmoil in Puerto Rico. They both met in the market, shopping for groceries, and my grandmother raised 6 kids in the back of a jewelry store on 103rd in Lexington. He was the first Puerto Rican jewelry store and bric-a-brac owner in New York. So I wrote this about my tata, who raised me and who I love with, to this day. I believe she's protecting me. So it's called Tata. Well, ¿dónde está la comida para este niño? Tata said. See what I have left on the stove. If not, boil some eggs and potatoes. This child is skinny. She'd walk through the yard, patting each kid on the head, counting and saying each kid's name aloud. Tata was clever. She made meals and taught English. She wove rugs from torn cloth. She steamed stamps off envelopes and wrung the necks of plucked chickens in the kitchen. I hope one day to tell her story and tell of her silver hair braided atop her head. Tell of her life as an Indian hiding. The story is in me, just waiting, waiting, waiting to be told.
So tell me about that poem.
Tell you about that poem? My tata was someone that, as a young age, I believe she knew that my life wasn't going to be easy. She told me the truth about who she was, bit by bit. I always assumed she was a Puerto Rican woman, but she wasn't. She adopted the Puerto Rican culture because she was ashamed of being Native American. My interactions with my tata as a young boy were very poetic. The way she would show me or have me look at my community. The way she would go to the flower shop, to the Italian guy and buy and play the numbers. The way she would tell me, you're going to go on that high school trip because I'm going to get the money. And she played the numbers with the Italian man, and won the money to send me on my graduation trip to Spain. Everything that I am today comes from the foundation, which was very spiritual, of my grandmother. My grandmother had the talent of being able to lay her hands on people and pray and heal them. She knew how to heal people through food and herbs. The downside of my love for my grandmother, not the downside, a negative in her life was her devotion to the Catholic Church. My tata served the Catholic Church as a servant. She mopped and she cleaned the neighborhood churches. She made breakfast for the Irish Christian brothers and for the priests and the nuns and cooked their meals. She held her head down as if not worthy of the respect of others. She kowtowed to white people and was a maid to a woman that was the head of the Coca-Cola company in Turtle Bay. My grandmother cleaned her home. I knew my grandmother as being a maid, as being subservient to the church. And one of the things that made me question my faith was with my grandmother, with all the arthritis she had in her knees, when I would see her bend on her knees and do the Stations of the Cross in St. Cecilia's, in this dark pathways up to the altar, I'd see how she'd suffer in pain and offer her pain up to the church, to her faith. And I resented that. I didn't like that. It didn't fit in with what I thought life or what faith should be. And that was my excursion into questioning religion and wanting to study religion till I settled where I am now as a Buddhist and know that I got it right.
What is something that people just don't understand, and one of the misconceptions, not a big, but just a misconception of the Lower East Side people may not understand?
The misconception people have of the Lower East Side is that people here are angry and resentful. People here are suffering with addiction or angry New Yorkers, so on and so forth. This community has produced some of the most intelligent young men and women, some of the most famous poets. Miguel Piñero, who I knew died on the streets. I watched as his ashes were scattered on the Lower East Side, as he requested in his poem, The Lower East Side. People assume that people living in New York City housing are lazy and want to be given and feel that they are entitled. It's the wrong impression. It is a stereotype that has been plaguing the community. I moved into this community ashamed I was living in New York City housing, to the point where I am proud of being able to accomplish the things that I've accomplished here. I've blossomed in New York City housing. I am indebted to the ability to afford to live in Manhattan, which I have watched become more and more uninclusive, more restrictive. The people that made this community are being pushed out of this community. And I'm an advocate for fighting for the community, for backing up organizations like Goals, for backing up organizations like Lungs that takes care of the gardens, and for working with people that want to advocate, for the ability to stay here. I used to fantasize about moving out of my community. I don't fantasize about that anymore. I fantasize about having a vacation home in Puerto Rico, where my grandfather ran from, and I'm writing a play about the Tainos in Puerto Rico and stuff. But this has become my creative, my nook, my creative place. When I leave the Lower East Side, I can't wait to get back, to the Lower East Side. And it's the only place where I know I can walk through the neighborhood and have young people say, "Hi, Mr. Hi, Ricky," and so on and so. People call me by name and people know me. It's home. That's where my Buddhas are.
And what has been one of the most important lessons in this life that you've lived so far?
To never give up And when an obstacle comes my way, and to start viewing obstacles as opportunities. That's something that's been instilled in me, even when I talk to you about acting, about going up and introducing myself, being more affirmative and speaking up. One thing that I make a practice of doing, I do not walk by people. If I make an eye contact with you, I'm going to say hello. I think that's very important in building community, saying hello and looking into people's eyes. I've learned how to say hello in Asian and Latino, this, whatever. It's like very, very important to me that everybody feels a part of.
Ricky, sincerely, thank you for sharing all that you shared and the variety and the milieu and the wisdom and the experiences and the gems and all the things that you just don't come across, the energy that you provided with us today. Do you have any last words before we get out of here?
Keep pushing the limit, keep creating out of the box, and don't say no to any of your ideas or aspirations.